All right. I think we'll get going there. So, officially, everyone, thank you for coming about the webinar. We are here and we are recording, so we'll make this available afterwards. And again, any questions that come up, we'll try to do our best to answer them. Please throw them in the chat. We will have an official Q&A section at the end, but again, we know some people's time is where it's at, and throw them in. We'll get them as soon as we can. What we'll do is we'll go through a couple of introductions, let you know who we are. So my name is Bobby Lott. I'm a strategic advisor at ISOS Technology. As a Platinum Solution Partner with Atlassian, we often work with organizations with things like a data center to cloud migration. I'll give our other two panelists a chance to introduce themselves. We'll go with Alex and then Galen after that.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Alex Kunzer. I work at Atlassian as a senior solutions engineer. So I support specific accounts on all things Atlassian products, from migrating to the cloud to expanding footprints to learning about new capabilities. Excited to be here.
Hey y'all, I am Galen Kralik. I am a senior consultant here at ISOS Technology. I am a subject matter expert on migrations, pretty much my bread and butter. So that's why I'm here to talk you through what it takes to get to the cloud.
Thank you to our panelists, and they're taking their time out of their day to be here. One of the things that we would like to do to kind of get this started is we'd like to get some input from you. So we're going to put a poll up on the screen. Let us know where you're currently at on your migration journey. We do this as we'll do a few of these throughout the webinar today that gives us some insight and gives our panelists an opportunity to see a little bit of where people are at on their, uh, progress with looking in their Atlassian journey. We'll give you just another second here that those results come back. And again, the options that we have on here comes from information both from Atlassian and from working with other, clients in the Atlassian ecosystem. So let's go ahead and we'll pull up our results here. So they're exploring options, actively planning, already migrating. So I think all of us on the panel are glad to see that you're not just hearing about it, as you know, Atlassian has been very judicious about getting that information out, but exploring options. And again, we appreciate you being here for that. Alex, anything surprising from those poll results there?
That's exactly what I expected to see in full candor. We're hoping to support you all to get educated on what planning can be done over the next 6, 12, 18 months to be best supported. But this is, I think, when I'm meeting with customers in the field, I'm sure ISO's team, when you're meeting folks in the field too, these are the conversations we're shepherding along, trying to offer some thought leadership. So that's exactly why we're here today.
Well, and really to encourage that, what we'd like to do is share a success story. We have many of them as a solution partner, but what we're going to do is we're going to have Galen walk through. He's going to talk about some of the challenges that this client had, what solutions were put in place, and then what was the end result. So for those that are, a majority of you are looking at and exploring options, hopefully this story helps give you a little bit more insight to that. Go ahead, Galen. Let's go ahead and start with some of those challenges.
Sure. So I think the first thing to consider is that with this particular client, and we see this with a lot of folks, there was a desire to transform, not just to lift and shift to the cloud, but this opportunity, it's like when you move from one house to another, it's a chance to clean up and have your dream home. So they came in knowing they wanted to do that. As we see here, there was, 5,000 plus daily users. This was being used to help manage thousands of hotel properties, and we transformed over 1 million issues in flight. Now, that being said, there's no magic involved. It was hard work and elbow grease from not just our team, but the client's team working with us to determine what that would look like. So we knew that they had performance and stability issues in data center environment. So one of the things we couldn't do was compromise that in the cloud. There are a lot of constraints or guardrails, I should say, in the cloud that help accommodate that specific thing. So fortunately, we didn't have to worry too much about that, but we did have to work within those guardrails and make sure it was performant. We knew that there was highly customized workflows. Again, as I don't know if we mentioned it, but these guys have been in data center for about 15 years. So over time, you collect a lot of tech debt, a lot of historical things, processes owned and architected by people who have long since left the company. So we had to do an analysis of all of that, work with the client, to understand what are the ideal workflows, do all the mappings to transform the existing workflows to the new ones. And then, of course, do all that transformation across these millions of issues. So the way we approached it, well, we'll get to that in the next slide. Um, I, for anyone familiar with Zephyr or X-Ray or any of these testing apps, they are great tools, but there is not a standard migration path to the cloud. It's very customized. So we had to, come up with a game plan there that involved a substantial amount of change management and preparation for the client to move into the cloud. And then, of course, the cloud migration required agile support. So again, that organizational change management, which is, of course, a service we do provide to help make sure that users knew when their data was moving, where to expect it, and how to get, seamlessly started day one in the cloud. And next slide. Perfect. So what our solution was to these. So we worked with the client to kind of consolidate this vision and be very practical about what's realistic, what's not, what's the highest priority, and start working down from there to standardize their project templates, their workflows, all their schemes. We started to architect and do data mapping for those million Jira issues. Again, because anytime you're changing these statuses or workflows, you have to change what exists and map it to something else. So this is an example where we use some custom tooling to help accommodate this moving to the cloud. Um, we did additional scripting to migrate Zephyr data manually. It says manually, it was still scripted, but it was manual effort to build this out. It wasn't a pre-existing tool. And then, of course, we use that proprietary tooling in a phase migration strategy, which I think is the most important part of this, is just realistically transforming a million issues over a weekend is just that's not going to happen, not smoothly. So we worked with the client to break this up into 4 quarter million issue groups based on different cohorts and move those in smoothly into the cloud. By the end of it, us working with the client, it was a well-oiled machine. Everyone knew exactly what was happening and kind of smoothly stepped in on that last migration window. Next slide. As a result, obviously they're much more streamlined in the cloud. It makes it much more manageable for their admins, which is again one of the value props of the cloud. But you also have to have, better workflows. If you just move a bunch of, as they say, garbage in, garbage out, yes, the cloud is better for managing those things. But if you bring in a bunch of tech debt, it's going to remain there. Obviously, we also saw improved performance, stability, and uptime. That is one of the hallmarks of the cloud. There were savings for the client team as they no longer had to work on managing the instance or obviously mitigating issues from all that tech debt, and they could focus on feature delivery and adding in new things, building, Forge apps or working on new marketplace app procurement and implementation for users. Their self-administration capacity went way up. Obviously, that's again one of the values of the cloud is that you don't have to do updates. You don't have to have these rolling windows and outages and patch your own stuff. It all happens automatically. So these admins were freed up to again work on bettering the environment rather than just keeping it afloat. Finally, they did have better data management and reporting because they had standardized everything. And because of those standardizations, there was also a faster resolution request because we were able to build in automated workflows, which wouldn't have been possible with the sheer number of workflows they had previously. So again, this paints the picture, I think, of working together as a single team with Atlassian, ISOs, and the client to kind of get to the promised land on the other side. It's no magic. It takes time. It takes effort, but we all have a role to play in this. I think, we'll get into that a little bit later on, what you can start doing to kind of prepare for that now.
Thanks, Galen, for sharing that success story. And hopefully, for those of you that are currently exploring options, that gave you a little bit of encouragement that, no matter how long you've been on data center, there is a path forward. What we'd like to do is, turn your mind a little bit to think about your own instance and the way that it's currently set up. Which of the Atlassian products are you currently running on data center that you would be considering for migration? I'll give you all just a second there to look at those. And again, this is kind of helping us have insight to real user experience. And then, our panelists will have some information for you here. Give you all just another second. All right. Let's see what our results were there. Okay, Jira Software, Confluence. I don't know about you panelists, but that seems probably about right as well. Jira, Confluence. Galen, Alex, any thoughts on that?
Nothing crazy or novel here. I think the piece to call out though too is for any folks who shared about multiple products, just exploring the connectivity that might be in the future is something that is pretty eye-opening. I know that these stand pretty independently on an on-premise instance, whereas JSM can speak to Jira. JSM can lean on playbooks from Confluence. These types of unlocks are very fascinating and definitely topics to bring up during the next 6, 12, 18 months of how those could work together, maybe in a different fashion than they do today.
And on that same note, Galen, from doing these migrations, does the complexity increase or decrease by the number of products, or is it more kind of along the lines of what Alex was talking about, where, the connectivity in cloud is so much more fluid than maybe it is as the standalone products on data center?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and I'll try not to get too in the weeds because it becomes very interesting. Ultimately, I will echo what Alex said is the connectivity in cloud is again one of the major value props there, right? Like infrastructurally, that is why we see the cloud offering as it stands, which is substantially different than what you have in data center. I mean, some of the, on the face it looks the same, but behind the scenes it's running a pretty substantially different approach, and that is by design to have this kind of transformative connective tissue, right? In the cloud, you have this thing called the teamwork graph, which unites not just all your Atlassian apps, but you can bring in external apps to that teamwork graph and have them referenced within tools. Obviously we didn't even touch on Rovo because that's not a thing that migrates, but these are the things that unlock the capacity of the cloud. Um, Now, what I will say as far as complexity, it actually becomes more challenging when you try and break the products apart. So if you're trying to migrate all of Jira and then all of Confluence, that's actually it. It might not seem like it, but that is going to be a bigger lift than migrating both at the same time. Because the tooling, again, assuming we're using the out-of-the-box tooling that Atlassian provides, which if we can, we will use it because it's going to be the best tooling available. It works hand in hand for multiple tools. So the Jira Cloud Migration Assistant will handle Jira Software, Jira Service Management, and then the Confluence Cloud Migration Assistant handles Confluence. There are pieces that work together, microservices that run in those that will do things like updating links from Jira to Confluence. You can run a link fixer once you complete the actual migrations. You can still do that if you run them separately, but then you have issues with drift. So then you have folks of like, what are we going to do now that we got Jira in the cloud, but Confluence is still on-prem? Are we manually updating links? Do we have now mixed links in Confluence of some pointing to data center, some pointing to the cloud? So that's something to consider from a change management perspective is the complexity definitely ramps up when you do phasic migrations or splitting projects or products. If you can do it all at once, if you have the tolerance to fit that into a weekend migration window, and obviously the data set does fit, that would be ideal in terms of the actual technical data transfer and connectivity. We totally recognize that that is not always ideal in terms of like the actual users and the business needs. That's where you come in to tell us that's not going to work for us. And obviously, as you saw from that success story, we can be amenable to that. But we're always going to push for what's the thing that's going to get you the highest fidelity with the lowest impact, and then kind of negotiate from there on what your tolerance is as an organization with how you'd like to pursue this. So I'll stop there rather than just continuing.
And clearly, both Alex and Galen, you guys are demonstrating the expertise you have in this, and I know that's what our guests had come to see. So, one of the things that we do want to make mention of is looking at the DC timeline. So, we'll go ahead and move on here a little bit, and we're going to cover what are the major milestones and why they matter for planning. Because again, to take on to something like this, there's some planning that needs to go into it. So we got a timeline we'll pull up here on screen, and we'll kind of briefly talk about these different dates. We'll give both Galen and Alex some time to kind of give insight to these different dates here. Go ahead, Galen.
Sure. So we've got four major milestones here. Obviously, the first one, September 8th of last year, a day that for some will live in infamy, right? A day that Atlassian made the announcement that we all knew was coming, I think, in our heart of hearts, that data center is not going to be supported forever. So the official end of life announcement was made in the fall of last year. Moving forward, what we see is March 30th is an important date. And they keep it consistent, which is nice. You don't have to worry about, is it March, is it April? It's always going to be March 30th for the remainder of DC. On March 30th of this year, the sale of licenses to new customers for data center will be sunset. So new customers will no longer be able to purchase DC subscriptions or DC marketplace apps. Now, this doesn't mean that if you have an existing data center instance, you can't add more users, right? That's where we get to the next milestone. This would be for brand new users. And frankly, if you're starting out for the first time in Jira and Confluence, you should start out in the cloud if you can, if you have that opportunity. So this one's not going to have a big impact on folks here because, as we saw, most folks are already entertaining how do we get to the cloud. So it's about migration. The next major milestone is March 30th of 2028, which is going to be the end of license sales to existing customers. So, and this is 1 year before the official sunsetting of data center proper. So you can't buy any new marketplace apps. You can't do any subscription expansions or add more users after this point. So if you do plan to cut it down to the wire, which we don't recommend, but if you do plan to do that, you're going to need to do some financial management of making sure you've got enough licenses to cover your needs to get you through that last year. And finally, on March 30th of 2029, that's the last day of data center support. Now, as you'll see there, an important piece is it's the last day of support. It's not necessarily, hey, we shut off all the services. If you're running it, in AWS, you've got your own instance. That'll stay up and running, but it's just going to become more and more deprecated. It will not be getting bug fixes or patches. You will not get any support from Atlassian beyond that date. So definitely plan to be out of data center well before that. And we'll talk a little bit more about what those dates are, but I'm going to plant one in your head now. You should plan to be out of data center by no later than November of 2028 to give yourself some breathing room to get out. Because there's going to be a rush of folks who wait to the last minute. Don't be one of them. So that's the timeline we have here. Alex, anything you wanted to add to that?
Just want to echo the kind of thought pattern from you, Galen, that I chatted with folks prepping for this webinar, all the way from product leaders down to the account team leadership inside the Atlassian ecosystem. And we're starting to encourage and welcome folks to, even though it says March 30th here, planning that you should be doing your final test migrations in September of 2028. And then call it through the end of the fall, be doing that final bit. And just as we can all account for in project management, something unexpected is going to happen, or name the wrinkle in the process. But as we can see, as it says on the screen, March 30th, but let's be in our minds thinking for that late September final tests.
Thank you both for those insights in that. And I'm sure one question that everyone has in their minds right now, what the heck do I need to do to be ready? So what we've got here is a checklist. Maybe you've already gone over some of these things. We'll put the checklist on the screen. And what Galen and Alex will do is they'll kind of talk through some of these. But, take note of these. Write them down, bookmark this part. But this is something that we run through with clients to help make sure that they're ready for this, and something that you can already actively be doing. So, Galen, why don't you take us through this list?
Angel chiming in from the back end. We have a couple questions in the chat that are relevant
Oh,
to the
perfect.
last slide. And so I'm going to go back to the last slide. We can answer
Love
these,
it.
and we can move on.
All right. So we have our first question. Does not DC become read-only after March 30th, 2029? Either Alex or Galen, either one of you.
DC does become read-only after March 30th, 2029. So as Galen called out, the capabilities and support that are listed in the text here will no longer continue, but you can be read-only, and it still quite possibly may be active in terms of alive in your instance.
Okay. And actually, the other two questions were kind of along that same line is, do the apps also become read-only?
let me get clarity from our product
I
team on
would,
how.
yeah, I would make the kind of assumptive, like if you can't edit, Jira issues themselves, whether or not you can edit the configuration of a marketplace app is frankly secondary. I would assume those are going kind of hand in hand together.
Okay. So, Alex, while you're trying to get that information, of course, we'll update as this goes on. What it sounds like is, you'll have your historical information, but it will become read-only, something as a reference, and I think the guidance given at the end of the timeline was very much, let's have that date in our mind of get you out by that time. All right. Any other questions? I think we've addressed those. And again, as Alex makes information available, we'll update the chat with that. All right. Okay. So let's walk through this checklist, give a little bit more detail here, Galen.
Sure. So this is a 7-part checklist that we put together of, in an ideal world, what are the 7 things that a client would do before even starting a migration? And this is that list. Now, obviously, these are high level. There's kind of some sub points to these. So the Atlassian Cloud Readiness Insights piece that requires you to set up your cloud organization. You can connect it back to your data center instance and run what's called a Cloud Readiness Insight. It's an analysis that will give you some output that's very useful with any partner, or even if you're going to try and do it yourself or work with Fastshift directly to prepare you for what's going to need to be remediated to move your data into the cloud. Next, we have the selection of a migration path preference. So this would be choosing whether you want to do a phased migration. Again, we alluded to doing multiple products at once or splitting them out. Do you want to do a big bang migration? What is your, tolerance for potential downtime with that? Is there a zero time or zero downtime tolerance? All of those things that you can get lined out are going to help paint a picture that's going to allow any partner to do adequate resourcing and planning to make sure that that goes off without a hitch per your expectations. It also helps get your leadership on the same page with the actual teams internally that are going to be delivering the work alongside ISOs and Atlassian. Similarly, reviewing app spend and usage, Atlassian has done some great work in building in tools. If you have Jira 9, 15 or higher, there is, which most folks are on now, there's a built-in app calculator that will tell you exactly where apps are used within your Jira instance. Obviously, within Confluence, there's a couple different ways to view where macros or apps are being used. Reviewing that spend, not just in terms of finance, but the actual usage, is going to be super important because obviously moving to the cloud, it's an opportunity to do some house cleaning. We always know folks want to consolidate apps or reduce their footprint. So you need to do this preliminary work first to understand what the impacts are going to be to your teams. And this can also include, do you have multiple apps that do the same thing? And could you consolidate them down to one? The more we know about that going in, the better we'll be able to plan for that because the timeline, again, going back to that success story we had earlier, building that custom work for Zephyr, that took a substantial amount of manpower and time. So there's certain things, right, that you just can't throw more people at. It just takes time to work through and test. So getting ahead of that with your marketplace apps is going to be huge to have you move smoothly into the cloud. And then the next piece of that is reviewing the actual migration path for those apps. Again, going back to that example, Zephyr does not have an out-of-the-box one. JCMA, the Jira Cloud Migration Assistant tool, it is great for a lot of apps, but the vendors have to build in their migration components into that app. It is available to them. So there are plenty of apps out there where it can migrate the data alongside JCMA and the rest of your core Jira data. But you'll want to make sure that you review that and understand exactly what's coming across. There can be parity differences in terms of what's available in the cloud versus DC for apps. Understanding those things is going to be very important for, again, determining your tolerance for what's necessary for day one, what's a fast follow, and what's a potential leave behind. So all of this so far has just been reviewing kind of the current state of things. Then we move on to security and compliance reviews. This is important for the cloud. Again, looking at all the apps, looking at Atlassian's core products themselves, getting your InfoSec teams signed off on everything. This can be a very long road with a lot of negotiation. It can involve legal in some cases to go back and forth with Atlassian's legal team to get everything buttoned up. You don't want to wait to get this process kicked off to make sure you're getting approval for everything. The last thing you want is to be in the 11th hour on a migration and realize some app that you're depending on has not been approved by InfoSec and won't be available on day one. Again, that's all the more reason, like Alex said, to be doing your final testing no later than September of 2028. Because anything like this comes up, that's pushing it back, and the last thing you want to do is hit that read-only date. Then the final two ones we have are these are nice to haves. You'll have to do this at some point during a migration, but the sooner you can get ahead of it, the better. Is identifying the external integrations and connections. So we all have users in our ecosystems who build scripts, Python scripts to hit Jira through an API to pull or push data into issues. Any of those things that may not be through an app or clearly documented somewhere, especially if it's a user that's going through a personal account, Jira does not see that any differently if it's through the API or through the UI. Any of those integrations will have to be cataloged, documented, and the users will have to be communicated with that they'll need to rewrite those moving into the cloud. In some cases, it's fairly simple, but the API endpoints and connections are different in the cloud. If you recall earlier, I mentioned cloud infrastructure is substantially different than data center. So we'll want to make sure if that's the case that we have a plan to get a demo environment in front of these users sooner rather than later as part of the migration so that they can build these out and test them adequately. Finally, anything you can do in advance to prep your identity provider is going to be substantial. Almost everyone going through SSO to the cloud, most folks already are. Any work you can do to clean up user groups that you want to align with Atlassian, that's the way most people manage this is not through backend groups. We do have a few folks who do that, still use the Jira groups directly in Jira rather than inheriting them from Okta. But if that's how you want to manage it, which most folks do, the sooner you can get ready to prep that, start, removing deprecated groups, cleaning things up, that's going to just get you ahead for that migration. So anything you can do there is going to be super helpful. Alex, anything you want to add to this checklist? Anything I might have missed?
Two extra thoughts. One, some folks may be hearing this and kind of trying to gauge level of effort, timeline level of effort. And I've supported numerous folks through this migration checklist. I'm sure each of the panelists have as well. I think it's fair to expect that if you have an extremely diligent and prioritized group of individuals, this could be done in a few weeks. But moreover, you should probably expect about a month of effort. And I would take the approach that this is a learning exercise. There is so much learning as to what the data shape of your on-premise instance is and what the prep needs to be done. And there are these, I'll call them these checkpoints. I think really a common one for the panelists can opine too, but is, okay, we have all these apps. Some folks have 4 apps, some folks have 40 apps. And each of those can have a decision point of how do we want to assess what to do with this? And that's just one of those moments where partnering with ISOS is really handy, where they host these sessions where they have opinions and experience on what this looks like and how to use this in the cloud. And actually, maybe there may be something native in the cloud to work with too. And so I'm hoping folks can just walk away with saying that this checklist, while it's a list of to-dos, also is really just a learning exercise over the course of, say, 4 weeks or so.
And, both of you have given some really good input into how someone can prepare. And I would just like to add, working with a particular client, as they went through this process themselves, they had been in their data center instance for a number of years, at least post a decade time. They were in such a rush to get to cloud, they elected to forego some of these steps and just let's hurry and get there. Galen talked about that earlier. And, coming full circle, and after they've been in cloud for a few years now, having a conversation with them, they came back and said, we now really see why Atlassian and ISOS recommended to go through these steps, getting a full shape of their data ecosystem, because they ended up bringing a lot of things and weren't quite ready to be in cloud and caused a few things, hiccups for them while they were there. And so just again, more anecdotal, but again, supports that there is a path forward and you've got partners and willing people to help. So with that information, we'd kind of like to get a feel for which path are you currently considering, since most of you are exploring, for migration. We'll give you all just a second here to answer that. And again, this is again to help people have an understanding. One, and hopefully some of you are taking from this, you're not alone. I know that Galen, you'll probably agree with me. Every time we talk with a client, sometimes they may feel like they're the only ones that are going through this, or they're very unique. And while every business is definitely unique in their, pain points, operations, and businesses, there are other people who have been through this, and there's an opportunity to learn from those experiences.
Yeah, I mean, again, I wish I could find a better analogy, but it really is like moving from one house to another. Professional movers, they understand how to pack things, how to put them, you don't put the fragile stuff on the bottom. There's some obvious things there. But yeah, every move, it's your stuff. It's your belongings. This is your life in this house that's getting moved. And there's obviously some concern that comes along with someone else coming in to, package that data and move it to a new source. But in the same way, we can work alongside you with that. If there's certain things that are very fragile that you want to handle internally with your team, we're happy to provide best practices and guidance on how you can do that and work alongside you. We want to provide, ultimately, our goal is to get you not just to the cloud, but successful in the cloud. So a big part of that is just we know that everyone's a little bit different, but there are some practices that are always going to remain the same.
All right, we got our results here. We got 50% of you on the still evaluating, not sure. Atlassian Government Cloud, Atlassian Cloud. It looks like we've got most people who aren't quite sure or they know the path, but I guess I'm personally a little surprised there wasn't more hybrid or phased approach. I think that's a little bit encouraging. What do you think, panel?
I also share that it's encouraging. I'm actually not surprised that half the quorum is saying not sure. And the reason why I say that is that migration checklist that we just went over a few slides ago really is the proof in the pudding that you start to form an opinion over that exercise. There have been some customers who have said, we're going to do this, and this, and you learn a few things along the way, and it actually makes more sense to be a phased approach, for example.
Mhm.
And so I think the outlook of actually not being sure and waiting to crack open the information is a very, very valuable place to be, because that's a posture of learning to make sure whatever route forward done is the most successful one.
Yeah. And just like the example that Galen gave, when you are packing a house and valuables and things, you want to make sure of those steps. So what we'd like to do is give you a few options, and kind of go over some best practices that reduce the risk and that will kind of help you unlock the most value for your time and which path to go forward. So, what we'll do is we'll have, you can go ahead and go to the next slide, Angel. We'll have Galen kind of go through the Atlassian cloud migration part, and then we'll have Alex speak to the fast shift program and what that looks like. So, go ahead, Galen. Let's go over the Atlassian cloud support.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, so one of the things we already talked about that's not documented here is again, big bang versus a phased migration, multi-site. We'll go through kind of a flow chart of where those decisions are made. But regardless of what happens there in that particular data ingress pattern for your migration, um, we have multiple ways to do that, right? We've referenced JCMA and CCMA, the out-of-the-box tools from Atlassian that are supported by Atlassian. We reference, oh, we're back.
There we go.
Well, this could not be a better example of why you don't want to wait to the last minute for a migration. No matter how much you prepare for something, the day you're doing it, something's always going to happen to throw a wrinkle in things, right? So this, thank you, Angel. That was actually incredibly strategic. I don't know if you meant that, but it worked well for us. Um, so picking up where we left off, we'll give the guidance based on what's going to get you to that desired destination point. And in some cases, it's only transforming half the data and kind of prepping it in a way that you'll be able to continue to transform once in the cloud. Obviously, we work closely with Atlassian, whether it's with a cloud migration manager, with SEs like Alex, with different folks, even on the licensing side, to understand, hey, what options do we have here to kind of smooth out this path? What we're all really committed to is getting folks into the cloud and successful there. And then finally, our process is designed to reduce risk and accelerate time to cloud within reason, right? Some folks, it is realistically going to take a year or more to get everything into the cloud the way they want it. Some other folks, it's down and dirty and they're ready to go in 3 months. And we don't want to force you into an ill-fitting box that's not going to work for you. So speaking of, accelerated patterns, I want to hand it off to Alex to be able to talk about Fast Shift.
Sure. Happy to. Fast Shift, for folks who have not heard of Fast Shift, is an Atlassian sponsored program to inject or augment the process with Atlassian resources. So Fast Shift partners with partners in the ecosystem to control and own the portions of the core data that are on premise. So things like your Jira issues, the data fields that are associated with your Jira issues, Confluence data. The Fast Shift program empowers you and FTE to help physically move and manage that project of moving that core data from your on-premise instance to the cloud instance. And rest assured, they work in concert with ISOs or solution partner to manage also how that impacts the other elements of your holistic migration. So thinking about things like your app marketplace, maybe custom integrations, workflows that are built, security, and also the training associated with making sure that once you're in the cloud, that the end users who are going to be engaging with it have the enablement to be successful. So Fast Shift is one piece of that holistic picture that's free of charge to you, given that you engage with them. So that's one Atlassian resource to have on your radar going forward as you start thinking about this process.
Okay. And hopefully that gives you all some more information on these options. And we would be remiss if we didn't take a moment to talk about the government and the commercial cloud paths. I know we kind of touched on that with some of the previous conversation, but we have a graphic here. Feel free, take a screenshot of it. But we'll have kind of, both Galen and Alex talk to this a little bit more about is it required and the differences between the paths. So Galen, we'll go ahead and we'll turn the time over to you for this.
Perfect. Thank you. So again, I will try to be concise, which is not my strong suit. But it all starts with the decision of, is this required, right? This goes back to our prep steps of talking to your InfoSec teams. If, we've got clients who they work with, defense contractors. Yeah, they require government cloud. It's not even an option to entertain a commercial strategy. For some other folks, it could be somewhere in the middle, or potentially what we've discussed is, a hybrid strategy of we have portions of our business that do require that security clearance and that kind of airtight box, but we don't want that same, for our HR and finance guys internally, we don't want those same kind of restrictions. We want something that's a little simpler, easier to manage with more marketplace apps. So the first decision really comes there is how complete does that decision have to be? From there, the strategies are similar, and this is a great one to screenshot because this is the flow that we go through in making those decisions of what does that actual migration path look like for you. That first decision tree that we hit beyond whether cloud or commercial is required is, do we want to do greenfield or a migration? And for those who don't know, greenfielded just means out of the box, fresh instance. And in some cases, we have folks who want to kind of do a mix where we've got a client right now who wants to do a fresh JSM implementation because they don't like their current ITSM approach, but then they want to make sure that all their Jira software stuff is migrated over. So we can do a fresh implementation there, laying the groundwork so that we're not shooting ourselves in the foot. Again, going back to the moving analogy of making sure we're not putting boxes in the doorway. We can start getting stuff set up in the house before we start actually moving data in and historical data. Then it comes to, or is it going to be a federated instance? And again, I know that's kind of a jargony term. That really just means, is it one site or multiple sites within a single organization? If it's multiple sites, we're going to tell you right now, it should probably be a phasic migration. You don't want to try and manage multiple separate migrations into the same organization at the same time. So that'll help make that decision for you. If you want to do a single site, again, we go back to, do you have the tolerance to do it in a single weekend, which is almost always going to be smoother? Or do you want to do a phasic one, which might be a little bit more manageable, especially if you're a large org with very diverse and discrete business units with different requirements? So this flow chart will really help get you some idea of what are our options when you're working with those different teams. The main difference between government cloud and commercial cloud, obviously, is the security. That is not to say that commercial cloud is unsecure. It has a high level of security, but it doesn't meet those necessary standards for governmental work and compliance. So that's where this GovCloud strategy and offering does come in. As part of that, it is limited in what apps are available there because they also have to pass all those requirements. So Atlassian can install non-approved apps there. I say non-approved, they don't have that clearance. For example, I'll use like Script Runner as an example. It could be installed, but your InfoSec team would have to sign off on it. And quite frankly, if your InfoSec team says you have to go GovCloud, they're not going to sign off on a non-GovCloud app in that environment. More and more vendors are offering these GovCloud compliant apps in there, but it is a limited offering at this time. I would encourage you if you're saying, hey, I'm going to wait until more is available there, don't. That's not a good reason to not go to the cloud. There's more and more out of the box that Jira can do that will help get you over the hump and get you to a place where you'll be moving forward. Alex, anything you want to add or the Atlassian perspective there?
The only Atlassian perspective I'll share outside of this mental model, which I think is a really probably the most expedited way to think about it, is that where nuance does come up, rest assured Atlassian has subject matter experts to help navigate this conversation too. This is, I'll call it in the grand scheme of things, more of a trailblazing, pioneering effort to best support customers with specific security credentials. And so that's an invitation that if you do have specific security credentials, that we want to know about those. This is a tool that is a portion of the business that's evolving very quickly to be performant and supportive of this use case. So I just ask that this be a dialogue as you look to explore this option, given that it may make sense for you.
Thank you. And actually, for both of you, there was a question that came in. Is government cloud for US solutions only, or is it also available in the EU, UK, UAE regions?
Today, it's FedRAMP authorized for US government agencies only. And so that is how it's offered today. The roadmap isn't entirely clear. I saw this question as the conversation was carrying on, so I got some clarity there. Doesn't have any clear bounds or commitments towards a global footprint or what that would look like. So today it's just a FedRAMP for offering for US agencies.
Okay. Thanks for that. All right. So we have our last poll. We'd like to get a little bit more information, and then we've got a little bit more for you. What is your biggest concern when it comes to end of life of DC? So we've talked about a lot of things today. We probably, hopefully, given some solutions. I'm sure we've inspired some more questions. And while you're all taking a second to answer this, Alex, I really liked your approach on that this should be approached as a dialogue and an ongoing dialogue. This is not something that is decided overnight. This is not something that's decided in a weekend, but through conversations, exploration, working with partners, working with Atlassian. So I like that.
Yeah, we recognize it takes time to lean into this, but we, both ISOs and Atlassian, work to make this as valuable as possible through each conversation. There's a lot of wisdom in ISOs. I think you folks have been doing this for near a decade plus. The specific motions, there's just so many learnings throughout that journey to make these specific migrations. When I'm talking about these, the ones in the future now going forward, there's so many learnings to gather and make these efficient, which helps the process move quickly.
Agreed. Okay. Biggest concern, security and compliance. I think that's pretty accurate. Marketplace apps is second. Again, my experience that supports that. Downtime business disruption. I'm actually kind of surprised that's not a little higher, but that's good. People know that a migration, there's going to be some interruption to that. And cost and resourcing. So I feel pretty good about those results. What does the panel think?
I will be honest. I think it makes sense now that I'm thinking about where we are in this timeline that the folks who, didn't have security and compliance requirements have already moved. And the folks who are, still have yet to move is because of genuine concerns around that. What I would have expected would have been more of the downtime and cost and resourcing. But I guess obviously, DC licensing costs have become a little bit less appealing to stay behind. So you factor that in, and moving to the cloud, I think is a more um, prescribed motion, right? Like we know it's a matter of time. So you kind of a little bit less sticker shock. I think also I think the cloud value is a little bit more known to users now, where it's not a what am I really paying for, right? It's become pretty clear that the value is there.
Yeah. Let's see. We've got a question here. Should we manage both users and groups entirely through Azure AD, provisioning through the SIM, or should we provision only the users from Azure AD and continue to manually manage groups within Jira Cloud?
Yeah, so I think this goes back to
Hmm.
one of those IDP prep questions. I think ideally, and again, this is generalized across businesses. We'd have to take a closer look at your specific needs. Um, the less you have to manage on the Jira backend and groups, the better. Because then that's just one fewer place to have hiccups if you ever have a changing of hands, right? If you have someone who's been managing that, they leave the company or move into a different role. Someone else then has to get up to speed on what those groups are, as opposed to having it managed through your Active Directory, which would then just keep those constantly aligned. The other benefit too is obviously you change it in AD if they're all synced up. All those changes will percolate through to Jira and Confluence. So I think in an ideal world, you have it entirely managed through AD.
Hmm.
The
Yeah,
realistic answer is it could be a little bit more complex, but what I will say is this: you are leaving some of the freedom of the cloud on the table if you do that. One of the, again, value propositions is less overhead for your admins. So if you're still choosing to manage your groups on the back end in cloud, you can do that. But that's adding back some of that overhead that's been removed for those admins who've been freed up.
I will add one other benefit of using Azure through IDP is where the poll identified security and compliance is one of the major concerns. If you are managing access to Jira, the products, viewing issues through Active Directory, that's usually managed by an identity management team. There's a sense of checks and balances. So you may have Jira administrative privileges in your Jira instance, but by managing the groups by IDM or through your IDP, then there is a little bit of, hey, there actually is security in your Jira spaces as well. And so there is multiple benefits by going that way. But I agree with what Galen said is a lot of versatility with the cloud. Alex, any of your opinions on that?
I think the only piece I'll add is that, and this might be a bit of a digression, but I think a healthy one nonetheless, is just to double click into some of the differences. And a common sentiment we hear from a lot of the DC admins is the bottleneck effect, or feeling folks that may need to not only manage IDP like this and security, but then also standing up new projects and things like that. And there are now more levers in play to help relieve that bottleneck while still adhering to compliance requirements across your organization that honestly help you scale in a way that's a little more sustainable and durable over the long term. So those are all during the pre-migration phase. I work in conjunction with Galen and other folks to demo what that looks like for you all, so you can get the comfort of that, because it is different. So this is one of, I'll call it numerous, more than I can count on both hands, of experiences that are a bit different, but thought of with intentionality to help you scale where it makes sense.
Okay. Well, and with that, if we haven't overwhelmed you completely by this process, now comes the good news. What are your tools and support to do this? As someone who is considering, and the majority of you are considering and exploring options, what is the Atlassian Fast Shift experience? How does that interact with ISOs, the support, the assessments, the execution, and the governance? Basically, you're not alone in this. You have multiple support. And really, that is why we are here and even having this webinar is to give you some of this information. So let's go ahead and take a look here about when do you engage with a solution partner? That's a question that has been asked to me multiple times, and maybe some of you are currently thinking right now. So let's see. Let's have, Galen, you address this first, and I'll have Alex chime in.
Sure. So as often a solutions architect on these migrations, I'm gonna say as soon as you could get in contact with us, the better. The longer road we have here, there can be long conversations about, purchase orders, all the bells and whistles, the contractual elements, to getting an engagement started. But there are pieces we can do to get folks on board who may not have boots on the ground. For example, one of the things we offer is a cloud readiness assessment where we will do a deeper dive into your instance and give you a report that can be, geared towards executives. We'll present it of outlining here are the things you need to do to get an appropriate cloud posture. Here's your timeline. Here's what you do now. Here's what you do next. Here's what you do later as kind of a nice to have, and really paint that picture of what it's going to take to get you to the cloud. It doesn't have to be you're diving in with a full migration tomorrow. So we have steps that we can put into place, and that does involve bringing Atlassian in and knowing where that makes sense, and including them in those conversations, to where we can simplify environments, or if we do want to just send it over and clean it up later. I don't recommend that, but sometimes that's the mandate from leadership. The sooner the solution partner can get involved, the better picture we can paint and help figure out not just where we fit, where the client fits, but also how Atlassian is going to best be able to help us. The Fast Shift program has been a game changer for us, and a big part of working with Atlassian through some of the initial iterations of it has been really learning like where do we fit best, where does Atlassian fit best, and kind of tag teaming these challenges. As you can see from the Atlassian side, there's a bunch of different folks in play here. And Atlassian does a good job of managing those, but we as a solution partner are going to be along for the ride the whole time. So the sooner we can build that relationship, the better we're going to be able to understand your environment and make sure that we can advocate for you and make sure that you get what you need in the cloud.
Alex, your thoughts?
Yeah, just from the Atlassian perspective, as a part of your account team, we're looking to have conversations with yourselves as just kind of chatting through these. And as an SE and my peers, we're trained to help begin these conversations and trained at cracking open the data to help have these conversations so that way we can start making decisions, recognizing that we are not the ones who are then working alongside you once those decisions are made and in the future a contract is executed. So we're happy to start these conversations and shepherd you along where it makes sense. We also do enjoy partnering with solution partners early. So that way, when we do uncover information or nuance where it is important to know, that's seen by both myself and the solution partner opposed to a pass-off exercise. Those friction points or just risks offer moments where things might be missed or overseen in reality where they shouldn't. And so we like to work together. And honestly, like as I said, that 4-week effort can actually be expedited when we bring in some more minds to assist in that process too. So thinking about that from a couple different perspectives may shed some light that will benefit each of you.
All right. Well, I think we have sufficiently given you all some information and some things today. If there is anything that did spark through this, please feel free to drop us a line here. Go ahead and throw that in the QA. We do want to make sure we give an opportunity to show. We got some links for you that are ready. Link to the cloud readiness quiz. And then again, being able to check out that roadmap, see what's up and coming. I will say, in my time in the Atlassian ecosystem over the last 7 years, it has been amazing the pace that Atlassian is continually improving their tools, improving the processes. Me and consultants often will talk with each other of, man, I logged in one day and I log in the next day and there's some new feature there. The fortunate part is Atlassian does give a lot of headway and view of what's up and coming. And they really pay attention to the market of what people are asking for, what features are there. So we'd encourage you to take a look at both of these links. Yeah, is there any other questions we can help you all with today? I do appreciate y'all sticking around for the full hour. Yeah, we're happy to take any questions in the last few minutes.
I need an ISO's flannel. That's my only conclusion here. Galen, I love your
I will
shirt.
send you the link to where I got it.
I'm not going to lie, I'm a little jealous myself. So we'll send one to Alex too. Well, I'll just take the last minute. Thank you to Angel for putting this together. She's been very good to help this panel out, provide us information, coordination. Hopefully, you all found this time valuable as well. And again, look for future webinars from us in the future. We're all here for you guys, so we want to keep putting this information out there. Oh, it looks like we do have a question. Let's see what we got here. Does Atlassian plan to extend end of life period for enterprise clients?
The documentation I have seen is not pointing in that direction. With that said, that's an invitation for a dialogue where if there are technical blockers or reasons that simply cannot be moved, we look to support our customers with the best foot forward, with the understanding to make you all successful. So the documentation today, the end of 2029 is the time to plan for that. And if there's a viable reason, let's have a dialogue because we are willing to support you all.
And Alex, if they're wanting to have that dialogue, what would be the best path to go through? Would it be through their Atlassian account rep, or is that the best path? Okay.
That's the best way to start that conversation, asking or bringing to the table. We're thinking that there's a technical blocker that is a non-starter for us to move to the cloud. We'd like to discuss that. That cues off a protocol on the Atlassian side to do the investigation with you all.
Okay. And if governance is not ready for the EU, UK, or UAE, how such clients would be able to move to cloud then?
That would be the similar technical blocker protocol. There are also other cloud offerings. One would be that the isolated cloud, which we didn't touch today, that might be a viable path forward, along with uncovering challenges. If that's a data residency conversation, there's data residency capabilities on the enterprise plan, specifically in the cloud, that we can discuss in terms of data hosting, localization from a microservices perspective instead of a multi-shared or shard perspective. These are all conversations that you have agency to discuss with an enterprise agreement. So there's a couple different ways to take that conversation to make sure you're best supported.
And I'll just echo, after working with Atlassian on certain enterprise accounts, I am very impressed with the level that Atlassian will put into working through those technical blockers. We've been through several in the last year of blockers that by working with a partner and with Atlassian, we've been able to find very sustainable and scalable solutions around blockers. So definitely would echo what Alex said and encourage you to work with your rep on that.
The beauty about right now, too, about bringing these concerns up is we have time. We have time to discuss, time to bring in the people from the Atlassian leadership to help discern what needs to be done. Whereas I can't say that with conviction 2 years, 3 years from now, and we're much closer to the gun. So,
yeah. And again, if any of you feel like you'd like to have further conversations with us or with Alex, please feel free to reach out. Again, we like to make ourselves available to answer those questions because we understand this is a big deal for people. So. Let's see. Any other questions? I think we have addressed them there. I know we're at time. So again, everyone, we appreciate you, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks, everybody.